Olá, amigos. Olá a todos. Bem-vindos a una nueva conferencia del ciclo de charlas de las Olimpíadas Nucleares de América Latina, Hacapower Latam 2026. Hoje receberemos um especialista internacional em terapias de radiofármacos, quem falará sobre Radiopharmaceutical Therapy from Discovery to the Future of Cancer Care. Eu tenho o prazer de apresentá-la ao Dr. Ilya Gipp. He is a medical doctor, PhD, ambassador da Oncidium Foundation em Estados Unidos e é o Chief Medical Officer em GE Healthcare, com sede em Atlanta, Estados Unidos. O Dr. Gipp é um médico acreditado em diagnóstico por imagens com um PhD em neuroradiologia. Está em la primeira linha de la lucha para mitigar as consequências do câncer. So now I change to English. The lecture will be delivered in English and the questions should be posted in the chat. They will be answered at the end of the presentation, or if the time exceeds 40 minutes Zoom limit, they will be answered in the WhatsApp group where everybody can see the answers. We greatly appreciate the collaboration of our partners, especially the Oncidium Foundation with Efraim Perini, which provides us with valuable opportunities to expand our professional network. This talk is being recorded and will be posted in the Hacapower YouTube channel. Thank you very much, Dr. Ilya Gipp. The floor or the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And then somebody please holler that you see my screen and that you can hear me. Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Now, you already named the title of my talk. You already said where I do reside. All I'm going to do is I'm going to have a very quick introduction slide. I do not have any disclaimers, but I am involved with various professional associations as well as non-for-profit organizations in the fields of cancer care, radiopharmaceutical therapies, advanced therapies, and just as importantly, early detection. Now, I very much welcome this initiative because one of the greatest challenges we have in all of those fields is people. We want more talents, we want more people to come to the field and help advance it together and share the excitement of what can be done at this groundbreaking moments of innovation coming into the field of healthcare, coming into the field of technology, where the merger helps everyone to get better care for the patients. Where I would like to start is a little bit of a history. I love history myself, and this is something that brought us to what today we call radiotheranostics. The first part was fundamental, and it was more than 120, 130 years ago, the discovery of radioactivity, the origin of radiobiology and the effects of radiation onto the tissues, both healthy and non-healthy tissues. The development of brachytherapy as the first type of radiation therapy. Then came the next part, which was the ability to use radioisotope treatments and target organs as well as some initial steps in imaging itself. A next step was the functional targeting and the imaging guidance. And this has brought us today, and I apologize for some commercial names coming from the pharma industry. This is the area of radiotheranostics and the area of theranostics that we are currently in. Now, I will talk about some of these steps because, as I said, it's also about the origins and about the future of cancer care. Something that really stands out is the real breakthrough that something like iodine-131 isotope therapy brought to medicine itself. On the photo, you see Dr. Solhertz, who has performed the first targeted approach in medicine. Now, if you go online today and you start searching, you're most likely going to find that the first targeted treatments were in the 70s related to breast cancer. But really, if we look at the way how iodine is distributed in the body, this is really the targeted therapy towards the organ that needed that therapy. And also, this is one of the very first, probably the very first precision medicine realization, but most importantly, with the assessment and the response prognosis. The next thing is that this is one of the very first radionuclide therapeutic use. The reason why I say one of the first is because a couple of years earlier than 1941, when this picture is taken, there was an attempt to also use phosphorus 32 to basically start something what we call today a radiopharmaceutical that was really targeted based to try if it does something. Iodine 131 really started the new era. This was also the very first radiotheranostics concept because sources of iodine 131 were used to really start tracking of whether you're really reaching the organ. And then today, of course, we have a diagnostic therapeutic pair with iodine 123 and iodine 131. And the last is that what Dr. Solhertz did was laying the foundation for personalization and adaptive therapy strategies. Because the device that Dr. Hertz is holding his finger on, called multiscaler, basically is together, but this is something that today we use gamma cameras, SPECT CTs, which in principle do the same kind of after radio ablation is still, this is the temple of with radar of legacy. Oncidium Foundation connected me with Hacker Power, and this is something that I would really like to strengthen. Years ago, started something that engaged. This is called a tackle, and giving the ability to people around the world in doing something to. Yes, is all walking, dancing, biking, any kinds of the sports. So please watch out. September is when this is another iteration of this initiative. We're inviting everyone to join it. At the end of the day, this is gathering together. This is please keep in mind that this is not just about you winning. It's also about you spreading the news. Now, the reason I'm telling this is also because of the shirt I'm wearing. Within that activity on my own, I called the activity route, and I did the run between the first location where the first clinical dose of iodine 131 was. This was in Cambridge, and then across the bridge to Boston, where the first dose was admitted to the patient by the first activity route. So I'm going to wear this today also to draw something so exciting as I. But let's get into what do we have today, because the birth of something that is really driving this field is the lutetium-177, dates back to 2015. Right? This is the molecule of the first papers, and most importantly, already shows very good clinical outcomes. It is something that helps to drive the field, and for clinicians that are seeing patients, this is the answer to a lot of issues that unfortunately cannot be solved in cancer care unless this kind of therapy is being done. The same way that this radiotheranostics is changing both how we diagnose and how we treat the patient. Now, this is a graph from one of the papers that shows for prostate cancer patients, PSMA PET completely replaced the FDG PET, a more conventional one. It is also more importantly, it replaced it, but it's also coming with the exponential growth of the number of procedures. The same way, the introduction of lutetium and lutetium PSMA is also bringing the exponential growth number of treatments being calculated in dollar value, but it's still significant growth. Actually, with us being pretty much stable, this is also showing that radiotheranostics has a dramatic impact today's cancer. Or putting this together, making this all consolidated. See on the left, you see 30s, 40s, 60s. This is the history. And I turn this history to the evolution of medical isotopes. When 2000, the theranostics with lutetium for the bright future. I will talk about this in just a second. There are a lot of next-gen emerging isotopes like iodine, tritium, another dimension of promise to the future of cancer care. So iodine 131 and 177, they both deserve a slide on the clinical outcomes. Now, the first paper that was published in the 40s with the thyroid disease, then instead of giving them other types of treatment which were not very organ preserving, so this patient was treated with radioiodine, and you can see the title and this same patient on the right. I think now we understand why it really draws attention to the novel type of treatment. The other example is that radiotheranostics today in the state-of-the-art cancer care. This example is from one of the community oncology programs in the U.S. Cancer Center. This is a patient with metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancer. And you can see the image, you can see the image that shows the areas that are affected by multiple metastases. And just after injection based on lutetium, there is a 99% PSA response. Something that is really making the future of the state-of-the-art cancer care impossible without considering theranostics. To have growth, and that's why it's very important for what we're getting today. Now, let's look at the radiotheranostics from the standpoint of radioisotopes. Those are all known isotopes. The interesting thing is just a very few of those isotopes being used in therapies. Like this is yttrium-90, iodine-1, lutetium-177, and radium-223 isotopes, and there is no way that we can claim that other isotopes are not going to play just as a role as iodine and as lutetium did. Coming in next, radioligand therapy deserves explanation in what is radioligand itself. In general, this is the molecule, so there is an isotope, there is a little square that represents the linker, the green part that is representing the ligand itself, then a kind of like a glass is showing the receptor on the cancer cell. And the interesting fact that there is multiple isotopes, as just I mentioned, could be isotope place. We're using lutetium, we're using iodine, but there can be others. Now, for the where bodies, antibody fragments, and molecules make the targeted therapy of cancer. Now, what about the target? Those targets are expressed by cancer cells, and out everything we know today, I think we have 5% to be able to giving the therapy. We can also use options because it's not just injecting, it's not just single in the single radiopharmaceutical that is added, it's also how it is given to the patient, whether sequential, alternate, or maybe various cocktails. Also, please keep in mind that in today's cancer care, the number of combined therapies is constantly increasing. Those are orange bars. And the number of monotherapies, when cancer patients are treated with just one type of the treatment, is significantly decreasing. Which means that to the next slide, I have to add another green part, which is called combination therapy versus monotherapy, because radioligands are going to be combined either with chemotherapy, immunotherapy, external beam radiation therapy. And if you multiply all of these options, and those are multiplication and adding signs, we're talking about thousands, if not millions, of possible combinations that are coming our way from the field of radiotheranostics, which makes this field exciting, which feels extremely promising, but it also makes this field extremely complex unless we start doing things right. And this is what I would like to talk about next. Because like the wonders, looking at those plains, maybe partially covered with fog, it's a very enjoyable view. But the most important is that there is a bright future ahead of us. Now, maybe we're here today, different levels of readiness in different countries. The bigger question is what connects us to this venture? And as it always, there are various obstacles that are on the way. I'm not going to verbalize those, but I'm going to talk about some of them just to give you a perspective of what can be changed towards making this possible for cancer care to fully benefit from the potential of radiopharmaceutical therapy and radioics. Well, maybe let's look first of all at the imaging part. All right, so imaging plays a very significant role. So on every step of radiotheranostics and radiotherapy, whether that's a diagnostic piece, because we've got to first diagnose the patient, selecting the patient and making sure that this treatment is really the best for the patient and this patient is in the control of the delivery of the therapy and follow-up and therapy assessment. Now, it's not just about individual imaging pieces and individual imaging modality. This just as an example, a patient with hepatic right? So time, it's a relatively complex task. Also, if SPECT-C data or nuclear medicine data is added, there is a noticeable uptake difference in areas that were not contoured by the MR images. What does it actually mean? It actually means that if only MR was used, the overall volume of the tumor that while the actual one is about. This is what we see. So the state-of-the-art cancer care, and this again another case from Willis-Knighton Cancer Center. Please pay attention to this graph. This patient is having a therapy. The patient is different other therapies performed before he actually did radiopharmaceuticals. You see, first was the external beam and this PSA level of the patient, which is an important biomarker of the malignancy and of a progression of the tumor, climbing until it gets enormous values. And with a single dose of PSMA, this number actually drops very, going from 83.6 and then coming into the normal values rather soon. It's interesting about patients that are greatly responding, but I think it's more also to talk about what holds us from making this therapy work in the majority of patients. A lot of publications actually tell us that potassium PSMA do not experience response that I showed you. So that in addition to imaging integration and clinical evidence gaps, we got to focus on strategies, dosimetry standardization, and also kind of a coordinate in the cancer care where there's multiple optionals. Number one is patients are different. Right? Patients can be based on the activity, and the dose that we deliver to those patients cannot be the same. So this area of freedom that we need to add on top of what we do is it may be the same disease, but it's a different, all different patients. They're having very small amount. Surely some patients are having a larger amount. Well, quite obviously, we would need a different activity and a different dose to be delivered to those different patients. Also difference in how those lesions appear, whether they're homogeneous or heterogeneous. The other piece, and I know this is a complicated slide, but every tumor is absorbing the dose at a different rate. So the first dose that we add to the patient is a lot of activity gets to the tumor. But the second dose, it's actually going to be 1/3, and then it's even less, and then it's even less, because we destroy the targets, so they become C for the radiopharmaceutical. We need to perform a real-world dosimetry in radiotheranostic to verify that the radiopharmaceutical is properly delivered and tailor those of the patient and of the disease that is having. Also, this is a way to enable synergistic potential between various therapies, like radiotherapy and external beam radiation therapy. When injecting 7, most of this gets to the, not to the mets that are in the bones, because it's like a sink. It's basically acquiring all the activity that needs to go. The possibility for external beam radiation therapy and radioligand therapy is amazing, because external beam radiation therapy can help us to do something on the macro level, something that we see, and radioligand therapy can do it on the micro level, something that is impossible or very hard to see because it works on the cellular level. So indeed, this is an example of combining external beam radiation therapy with radioligand therapy and radiopharmaceutical therapy. With one thing that I would like to get out of this for everyone is that this kind of approach requires a very close multidisciplinary coordination. When to give, what to give, how to measure the dose, and how to make sure that patients ultimately benefit those together, so that synergistic potential is not just 1 and 1, but actually combined together, it becomes more than 2. Last thing I will say is also the isotope availability, supply chain reliability. How to make sure that treat patients know about those possibilities. It's also where we have to solve the challenges that Oncidium Foundation serving themselves to do. Well, some isotopes, they're so rare that the cost of them, even if there is no free market for this, is significant. So there is a necessity to also try to find some viable ways to use radiopharmaceuticals to patients. The other piece is some non-governmental or intergovernmental organizations like the WHO that first last year, actually in one of the documents that was adopted, mentioned theranostics, and I believe that this is also opening a few doors. So Oncidium Foundation does exactly that. I'm not going to focus on this slide, but it's all about access, about education, which we're doing right, and providing hope to people. There are a lot of centers that become a part, qualified, if you will. And I greeted you on behalf of some of the company, like my company that I work for. But what I would like to finish is that the breakthrough therapies is inevitable. The bigger question is, how do we get rid of those obstacles? And we cannot do this without young force that is entering into this field. That's why I very much appreciate your attention. And on behalf of I thank you and open this up for questions.
That's fantastic, Ilya. Thank you so much. And it was the participants, because you mentioned several areas that I'm sure that they are thinking about that to answer and you mentioned several of them. One of them particularly interested me a lot, which is the real-time dosimetry. I'm not at the moment working more with radiation, and that's exactly, you need to know the dose in different parts, for instance, of a mango, of a melon, of any fruit, of food. So you check it. You are really reaching some of them, not only sampling, but a way that you can really check if you have the minimum that would be allowed. So that's really fantastic.
Dose to the patient, we bring activity to the patient. How is this activity converts into dose is another interesting aspect, which I believe is going to be defining for the next developments that are coming into this field, making it even more precise, more personalized, and also more exciting for everyone.
It's not more what you need. You need the activity. You can use it in patients. So it's also about cost. Why people relatation is incredibly expensive? Can you talk a little bit about the costs?
Yeah. Look, we also have to separate two aspects of the cost. Sometimes when the new radiopharmaceuticals, they come into the clinical world, the actual cost is not the actual drug costs. It also includes the development costs, and it also infrastructure that needed to be built to have this become available to clinicians and ultimately to patients. Now, lutetium is somewhat a rather difficult isotope to provide. It also exists in the diagnostic and therapeutic pair, gallium or with fluoride. But most importantly, it is also the fact that so far there is only one company that has those pharmaceuticals available globally, and in some markets it's registered, and it's not. But this time runs out. So there will soon be other companies that will step into this field. And I don't need to tell you that as soon as there will be generics, as soon as there will be others coming into this area, the cost is going to go down. Now, for some of this, and this was one of my last slides, like I mentioned actinium, just as an example. No free market for actinium. You cannot just go and buy actinium. But we're talking about something that the cost went up, I think, like 15 times in the past year, just because there's so little of this isotope on the planet. Some isotopes, they can be manufactured, but you need a reactor, which is not that easy and quick to build. We're talking about the potential for astatine. Well, astatine has to be developed artificially, because if we start mining astatine, the whole planet Earth has less than 1 gram of this substance. So therefore, we're talking about some things that are naturally very limited and rare. We're also talking about a lot of investments that need to be compensated, and that drives the price up. But so this Oncidium is trying to work on access, trying to raise the funds to make those therapies available to more patients. Something that became mainstream, like iodine, as you righteously mentioned, is no longer expensive. And I believe that we're entering the era when more and more of radiopharmaceuticals, they're going to go down in price and be available to more people.
That's what we really hope. And maybe this is one of the cost is one point that makes a major barrier in application. So we have one question from Eliane. What do you believe is the major barrier for the radiotheranostic applications to increase in Latin America as it does in Europe and US?
No, those kind of questions, I am always tempted to start talking about regulatory aspects. And you're not going to say in you. If we come to the bottom of this, that the true reason and the true barrier is awareness. If there is awareness on the possibilities, if there is awareness for the patients to know and demand this kind of treatment,